Well, thank you very much, Bob. It's just great to be here, to be at Harvey Mudd College, and I just want to say to the faculty and students, thank you so very much for inviting me to give this Bruce J. Nelson lecture series. I've had a wonderful day, just a fabulous day. I think the 2 one-hour classes this morning that the students can feel how much I love talking to the students and interacting with them. One of the students in David Vosberg's class asked one question, and I talked for another hour. Just irrepressible. But it was great. And it's clear that the students here are, and the faculty know this, they're bright, they're inquisitive, they're self-confident, and they ask great questions. So it was great. It was good. I very much resonate with Harvey Mudd College because I realize, even though we're close to Caltech, 26 miles, that this is sort of like Caltech, right? I mean, if I think about it, that you care very much about the mission to educate scientists and engineers, and I think here especially sound training in the humanities, science with the consciences, as you say. And I hope that we do that as well at Caltech. But also, I think what's very important here, what was clear today in my speaking with the faculty, is how importantly you integrate research with undergraduate education. Everybody does undergraduate research here, and I can't tell the students. We talked for an hour today about how that integration was part and parcel. You can't separate the importance of the two, their synergies, and you do that so very well. And like Caltech, so many of your graduates go on to get PhDs. We took a poll, and I think it's about 50%. And, of course, another similarity that we all share is the honor code, and maybe a sense of humor and appreciation for a good prank once in a while. But I think... but not tonight, right? Okay, no funny stuff. All right. Okay, now I'm in a little bit of a quandary because for most of my professional life, whether it's Harvard, named lecture, wherever, an ACS meeting, I show up with my Mac, my PowerPoint slides, and I'm good to go. And I can give an evening lecture, a morning lecture, an anytime lecture with my PowerPoint slides because it's all about my research program, and I live that day to day. So I kind of know it cold, and no matter how tired I am, I can light up when that first slide goes up. It's just, I get goosebumps when I look at my first research slide. And so I got to tell you, I'm a little nervous tonight. In fact, I'm very nervous because this is a different mission. This was a public lecture, not to talk about DNA recognition, but to talk about this International Year of Chemistry to explore answers. I'm reading this now, global challenges regarding the environment, energy, materials, and health. And so, and not to be cynical, should I come in sort of rah-rah and just talk about the environment and all the good stuff you guys are going to do for in health or whatever? Or do you sort of already know that? I've heard that from past lecturers and certainly professors in your classes. Because I think everybody in this room agrees, there's great energy in this room for chemistry and chemical engineering, that there's no question that chemistry and chemical engineering are going to be vital to solutions in the environment, utilizing renewable energy, novel materials, and promoting future health. So I'm not sure I'm going to spend a full hour making a case where I think the case has been made. By the way, I love this Dow graphic. I also found it on the web and put to music. It's just a kick, isn't it? So it almost was a shame watching it without the music, Bob. So fix that. All right. So my audience, I asked the professors, who's my audience? Okay, it's the undergraduate students, and I feel like I'm one of you. I've spent several hours. I think that was a good way to start the day, by the way. And so I've decided what I'm going to do, for better or for worse, and you may boo me off the stage here at the end. I'll try not to take too long, is perhaps my one contribution tonight would be to share my own experiences as a professor of chemistry at Caltech and how I perceive the future. and lessons I might pass on to this generation of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, considering careers in chemistry and chemical engineering. So I hope to the students this is okay, this decision that I've made, and I'm going to say this to you, that I'll try to do this in 30 minutes. I don't know how long this talk will go on, although you've seen me this morning, I'm dangerous. But even if just one comment I make of the multiple comments I make, if there's any one of you in the audience and I make one comment of say 30 points or 20, and it provokes deeper thought on your part, then it was worth your taking the Friday night to come. Okay? And so a lot of what I'll say to many of you will seem trivial. It's pretty obvious, and to Bob will know all of this because he's lived this. But if I can just sort of startle you a bit to get you to think about something you hadn't thought about before, then I think it will have been worth your time and my time, I hope. So let's start off. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you some thoughts. I just started writing. And then at the end, I'll give you Peter Dervan's recipe for success in life, which will be about 10 bullets. Okay, so just wait to the end if you want to tune out on your iPhone. I'm just going to sort of build a case, not take a position either way, and then give you some bullets. So I think everybody in this room would agree, students and professors, particularly the professors, because we're the old guys in the room. I did the math and I figured out that the students that I was talking to this morning, Bob, I mentioned this at the dinner table, were probably all born after 1990, okay? And so when I get up here, just like Madeline Jacobs, and say we're living in a golden age of science, they say, oh, give me a break. Is he going to talk about that stuff again? Okay, because in the last 50 years, they've been very good for research in the frontiers of science. And if you just look at any recent set of publications, one can see new discoveries and astonishing progress in all fields. And so it is a fact the last 50 years have been golden years. Golden age of science is a Ralph Cicerone term, so I borrowed that. I hope it's okay, Ralph. And I think in my time, in the time I've been a professor, this is certainly true of my career, we are seeing, you're not just a chemist anymore, but we're seeing the integration of chemistry, biology, mathematics, engineering, and medical sciences, that we're being integrated into all other fields. And that's going to be a very important point. I'm going to come back to that at the end. Jerry, it's an existential question, so get ready. All right. And so when I make the statement, or Madeline Jacobs makes the statement, that in the last 50 years the U.S. has become a world leader in most fields of science, you know, and you're just saying, oh, what's the big deal? It wasn't always that case, right? If you go back before I was born, you know, much of great science was in Europe, in Germany, and great German companies. So what happened? Because it wasn't true back 100 years ago. It's been true in my lifetime, so you say I'm a lucky guy. And so what happened? Now, I'm sorry, don't mean to pick on Madeline, who I adore, and she's my dear friend, but I'm going to pull a Sputnik on you, okay? But I'm going to put a different spin on it, and it's the spin that's important. So I'm phrasing the question, how did this golden age of science happen? And in the Yogi Berra phrase, you want to ask the question, are we still going to be in the next 50 years in the golden age? Okay, that's the reason for my coming tonight. And so let me tell you about the importance of luck, L-U-C-K. I'm not talking about going to Vegas, flipping dice. Okay, so I'm going to phrase something that I've known all my life but never really understood. So I'm going to tell you something almost trivial that you'll recognize when I tell you, but I didn't recognize it until I was like 60. Okay, and that is the importance of luck and how to recognize it. So what is luck? So our professional careers are shaped by the time we live in, and we should be aware how much external, if you're taking notes, unpredictable events influences our lives. If you're taking notes, external, unpredictable. So what happened in my lifetime may not be a good predictor for you, which is why we can't predict the future. Okay, so let's call these external, unpredictable events luck, both good and bad. And so in the context of the statement I just made, in 1957, I was 12 years old, third of 4 children of Irish immigrant parents in Boston, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, a satellite into orbit around planet Earth. And I know I watched Madeline's thing on the web, and I'm sorry, but we're about the same age, okay? This is important, so pay attention. This may be the most important thing I say tonight. Now, the satellite weighed 184 pounds. I don't think Madeline told you that, okay? And see, I'm a technical guy. And Explorer, our satellite, would not be launched for another 6 months. And Explorer would weigh 31 pounds. So the U.S. hasn't yet launched with 31 pounds. They're 184. Now, I want all my engineer and physicists by the end of this lecture to figure out the throw weight of the rocket that the Soviets had versus us. Okay? We were way behind. It was frightening, okay, in terms of rocket power. So get your pencils out and calculate the rocket power, but it was big. And so what happened in America, we realized that the U.S. was hopelessly behind. This was an unpredictable event not caused by me. You agree? I didn't launch rocket. I'm 12 years old. Okay. No, this is an important part of luck. So you could not have influenced it. Okay? This is important. Pay attention. Okay? So what happened was, but it shaped my life. Okay? So driven by heightened paranoia, it's a clever phrase, my phrase, heightened paranoia, regarding a likely technology gap, the U.S. government, this is late 50s, poured huge amounts of money into schools of universities. And so for the next 2 decades, there was tremendous U.S. investment in science and engineering, research, and education. Now, let me tell you what it felt like. And I apologize for the people born after 1990. So can imagine a time, okay, when I'm in college or something like that, thinking about grad school, when college students interested in science and engineering now felt it was their patriotic duty to move America to preeminence. So it was like going to war, okay? It was grand. More importantly, and I'm borrowing this from Ron Breslow because we've talked about this, that hundreds of graduate fellowships from NSF and NIH were awarded to individual students for PhD research. So the government was saying that we were special. The U.S. government, America, was saying we were special, that the full cost of our 4-year postgraduate education would be paid for by the government. And so it was an extraordinary time. So instead of the professors getting the money like it happens today by writing grants, students, you had the money, and you had it, and you had it, all of you, just, and then you decided who you wanted to work for. And it was great for the junior faculty because they were the most energetic people in the department. It was a grand time. And then they changed the business model, as we all know, in the 70s. Now, why am I telling this story? Well, the reason I'm telling you is that society was rewarded by this investment in scientific research. So we did it because of this unlucky event. But at the end of the day, our country and the rest of the world was rewarded by this enormous intervention in cash flow to scientific research. Great companies, chemical companies like Dow, which was on the screen, Dow Chemical, and DuPont flourished, creating better materials for humankind. The old guys and old women in the audience will remember plastics, at the graduate, right? Pharmaceutical companies like Merck, Pfizer, Warner Lambert, Upjohn, I could go on, provided new medicines against infectious diseases, increasing the length and quality of life. So there was enormous high payback for that investment. And even as chemistry matured, biochemistry and molecular biology, the new field of molecular biology was invented. How was that driven? That was all driven by NIH money, this whole field of molecular biology. And what did we get out of that? We got the field of biotechnology. So if you want to talk innovation in capital letters, biotechnology was basically invented in this country, driven by NIH funding for basic research. You had to discover the restriction enzymes, and organic chemists figured out how to make nucleic acids pure on machines, automated synthesis. It was an unbelievable time, innovation on steroids. Okay? And so then the Genentechs of the world were created, providing now for human medicines what we call biologics, monoclonal antibodies, very important in cancer. And now I think a lot of our blockbuster drugs in my day going forward are going to be biologics, proteins. Okay. The one story I like to tell, I don't try to get too techie in the evening, but let me just give you a number for you that were born in 1990. So in 1990s, we started talking about sequencing the human genome. And you take this for granted now. You all know that we've sequenced it, right? You take it for granted. It was great debate. Huge debate. Some professors said, well, if you got to sequence 3 billion base pairs and it costs $1 a base, what's the math? That's going to cost $3 billion. And that's going to take out of my synthetic organic research budget, okay, or my next laser. Seriously, this was not happy times. And so we persevered, we the scientific community and the federal government. And so in 1993, we decided to sequence 3 billion base pairs. It cost $3 billion. And how long did it take? Give me a number. Yeah, 10 years. Fabulous. It took 10 years. Okay, so 3 billion base pairs. That's the 2 meters of DNA in each cell. Buck a base, $3 billion. It took 10 years. So Francis Collins and some private competitor companies sort of announced jointly that they had finished the sequencing around the year 2000. Okay, in the year 2011, you can do the 3 billion base pairs for how much? No, $10,000. You're stealing my lines. That's not good. Okay, so $10,000, you can do a human genome now in 2 weeks. So what used to take 10 years and 3 billion can be done for $10,000 in 2 weeks. Now, Jerry, hang on to your hat. There's now talk on the internet, do a Google, that as we enter the age of now what's called a $1,000 genome. And so there's no question in my mind. We will be able to take this guy in the front row and do his entire genome for $1,000 and maybe tell him whether he should smoke or not. Okay? I didn't say what. All right. Okay. So there we go. So that's bottom line is don't have a vision that's too small. Okay. How narrow were we in the scientific community back in 93 thinking we can't spend $3 billion to do this? And of course, this is going to be hugely important in the field of what we call personalized medicine and then understanding better the human mind and how our minds work. And it's just going to be fabulous. Now, every once in a while in this talk, you can tune out. I'm going to get on my soapbox and just tell you something that's bothering me, okay? And it may not even have anything to do with science. So I'm at one of these bothering points, okay? And I crossed out some things. But, more recently, I must tell you that I have been worried that society has lost its way regarding values in the last decade. And that's not true of anybody in this room. You guys in chemistry and chemical engineering are at the heart of what's special about America. But I think that instead of asking whether our lives were spent doing something worthwhile, don't let me down, the metrics for success recently has been money. Okay, too many young kids going to Wall Street, and the goal is to get rich, not improve the world. And I hope we can get away from that. I hope we can go back to old values. Okay, so really what I'm doing tonight is and I hope this is not a repetition of Madeline, but the question we all have to ask ourselves in this room is, will we return to a Sputnik moment where the government will make huge investments in science, research, and education? And so it turns out I don't know the answer to that. Nobody can know because we don't know what the pressure is going to be, but there are clouds on the horizon. I think that with the high national debt that must be paid down, one could argue that we are in for a difficult 5 or 10 years. Don't get discouraged, Jerry. I'm going to end on an up note. Federal research funding is likely to decrease. I think research universities, we talked about this at dinner, are struggling with declining endowments, Caltech included, Yale included. Corporate support is squeezed at the bottom line. And with globalization, which had to happen, it's led to an export of our research expertise, how one does big pharma discovery. And I think in addition, post 9/11 security issues delay visas and prevent the best minds from the non-U.S. countries that want to come to America to add to our scientific enterprise. I think that's a mistake. I'll just add, when Jackie Barton got the National Medal of Science last week, we're at the White House, I think that of the 7 or 8 people that got the medal, 3/4 were non-U.S. born. So we should be very humble. We should realize so many smart people come to America, get married, buy a house here and stay, and then add to the quality of our lives and our society. So let's not forget that. And then I think, and I was chatting this morning with some of you about this, I think there's a lack of trust in scientists. We're going to deal with it. For example, in climate change, that's created by polarized political parties. And so, for those of you who have kids, this is tough love for this audience, but you deal with it. We all think we're the good guys, but it's out there. And I think we all should worry about our decline in achievement in K through 12 math and science education. And if there's one thing that's on Obama's mind when I was at the White House, this is it. That in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, only 1 in 10 kids is really getting a proper education in our country. We're in deep doo-doo. We're in trouble. Okay. So, you can go online and read a report prepared by this ACS Presidential Task Force, chaired by George Whitesides. It's called Innovation, Chemistry, and Jobs, and it's online, so you guys should look it up. But I looked on there to get some statistics just so I'd have some credibility up here. And since 2008, nearly 25,000 jobs, including thousands in research and development, R&D, as they say, have been lost in chemical manufacturing companies in the United States. 25,000 jobs since 2008. Okay? And you can talk about squeezing bottom lines and all that stuff, but I think that what's killing us, because these are great companies, is, and I've sat on a publicly traded corporate board, is imagine you're a CEO. I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on you. I'll pick on you. Okay. So imagine you're CEO of a corporate board, and you're going to be CEO of that board for age 60, let's say 5, 6, 7 years, and walk away with $20 million payday, lots of options. Okay. And so why should you make a $2 billion bet on a new drug that might not get approved for 15 years or 10 years? Okay. So your shareholders are only going to reward you on a quarterly basis on Wall Street. And so I think that what's happened in America is that we become risk adverse, where we have an aversion to the risks and costs of investment in long-term R&D because senior management doesn't get rewarded for that in terms of our current capitalistic structure. And we got to fix that. We need a different business model. And I think in the old days, and maybe I'm just getting too old and I'm looking back too much, but when we had central research at DuPont and Bell Labs and basic research labs at IBM, this was not the case in the 50s and 60s. Great stuff was being discovered that wouldn't play out in terms of practicality for 20 years. Again, I think this is the pressure from Wall Street and shareholders, and we got to fix it. Okay, so at the heading of this page, I'm getting there. I'm about halfway through, so relax. I have on my heading, I says, navigating the next few years. How do we prepare our students in times of change? And I've got what advice can I give this generation? In parentheses, I put tough love. Okay, so I think that that this ACS task force thinks that they use this word innovation. I've seen it up here in the movie. And they believe that large companies aren't going to do that. So they put forward in this report you can get online that entrepreneurs and small businesses may hold a key in generating new job opportunities in the U.S. and helping chemistry solve problems facing society. Do you believe that? I'm not so sure. I think, George Whitesides said that. So okay. So I think that that my own perspective is that the venture capital startup business model, which I've participated in, I've started 2 companies myself, has changed in the last 10 years. And they just don't have the patience anymore. And so that whole business model is less patient, and I think it's going to be more difficult for risk venture money to do startups. So I don't know what the right business model will be. Now let me say something very, very positive and optimistic. So in this innovation report by the ACS Task Force, they quote President Obama in a State of the Union address. And I like the quote, very Obama. So I'm quoting him now, not plagiarizing. The first step in winning the future is encouraging American innovation. So innovation's all over the place. None of us can predict with certainty what the next big industry will be or where the new jobs will come from. What we can do, and I put this in bold, what America does better than anyone, and this is Obama now, is spark the creativity and imagination of our people And I must tell you, I really believe this is true. So when I sit, and I have the privilege sometimes of sitting with some people that are associated with the Caltech Board of Trustees or friends of the Board of Trustees, people of extraordinary accomplishment, say from China, people that stood up to those tanks, and then went to Columbia and got 3 degrees, one in law, business, and okay, and are now hedge fund managers worth a fortune. And I say, well, you know, we see all this stuff moving to China, which is fine. That's great. No issues there. We talk about it, and he says, you know, but because we're talking about renewable energy, who's going to solve it first, who's going to get there first in this very complicated scientific and engineering race. And we talked about this, and this is something I believe to my core. There is something special here in America about our universities, our rule of law, our business ethics, lack of corruption, and the American optimism. There is something special about this country, so you should never get discouraged. Okay? We're going to get there. We've still got our fastball. We're okay. Okay. So let's now, just so I adhere to the task that was given me, mention just 3 short stories. One will be borrowed from Nate Lewis, so I hope you'll forgive me because you heard him lecture last year. So what are the huge, important problems on planet Earth that will require your best efforts? And I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, you can get anyone in this room to come up here and give these next couple of lines that in the face of climate change, population growth and global economic development, adoption of renewable energy is imperative. We are simply going to need more energy on the planet. It will become increasingly costly to depend on fossil fuels, and particularly the impact of burning fossil fuels on planet Earth, the environment. And so, again, it's a no-brainer, sorry to overuse that word, that solar power is one resource the world will not likely to exhaust anytime soon. It's free. And you, the next generation of scientists, must figure out how to do what's called artificial photosynthesis, just like a plant, to generate clean chemical fuels in a cost-effective way. And so I went on the web and I saw that last year's Nelson series of speakers, one of them was Professor Nate Lewis. So he's given that talk, so I won't relax. But I did hear him talk recently to a group of potential friends of Caltech donors. It was a development thing, and we were in the Athenaeum Library. And he was so articulate. It was so fabulous. He was talking about how important it is to make solar energy economical to mimic what we call biological capture of sunshine by photosynthesis in plants. And he was making the strong case that the way you store energy from sunlight, which is free, is in chemical bonds. Yay for chemistry, okay? Because it's a very high energy dense form of storage, as well as dihydrogen, another chemical. Okay, and Nate points out, because I took notes in this knowing that I was going to come over here, he points out that we need to go 3 for 3 in artificial photosynthesis, a trifecta. He says it's got to be cheap, efficient, and robust. So it's no good if it's cheap and efficient if it doesn't work all the time. If it's no good if it's efficient and robust, it's a rock, works, but it costs a fortune. So it's got to be cheap, efficient, and robust. That's your challenge, your generation. We didn't solve it. Okay. Let me talk about the information technology revolution. So when Bill Dobb and I were students at Stanford, I was a postdoc, he's a grad student. He'll remember the days in our generation when each chemist would have to devour our weekly journal in synthetic organic chemistry. You couldn't go through the week without reading tetrahedron letters and put it down on your little file cards, right? And so we would be deep in one subject, say in organic chemistry, synthetic reactions, okay? Boy, I must sound like a dinosaur to you guys. God damn, why are you even bothering to listen to me? And so in your world, with your iPhone, the web, Google, the personal computer has changed all that, right? Now everyone in this room has access to all the information all the time. You don't have to read journals anymore. You just Google whatever word you want in chemistry, engineering, biology, physics, math, and there it is. How bad is that? Wow. And so now the challenge for you, now that you have access to all the information all the time, this is a genuine revolution in your lives, appreciate it, is now you're going to have to learn how to connect the dots. That's going to be the creativity. That's the innovation, and how to work across multiple disciplines. And, you know, I read the New York Times. Maybe shows my political leanings, but I'm going to come back to the Wall Street Journal, so you won't, okay? So I read the New York Times, and I love to read Thomas Friedman, and he points out that, you know, in this, one of his articles, in this merging of globalization and the information technology revolution, that it's going to unleash, is his word, a global flow of ideas and new collaborative opportunities. And why am I bringing that here? So that means that every student in this room, instead of being specialists in silos like Bill and myself, sorry, Bill, I don't mean to pick on you, you're going to have to be constantly growing your talents. Okay, it's a little scary, but you heard it here, so deal with it. You're going to have to be constantly growing your talents. You may have to reinvent yourself scientifically every 5 or 10 years, or professionally. So let's just consider Nate Lewis's problem, in case you guys go over to Caltech and join his team. Let's think about it. Artificial photosynthesis. So we're going to need some inorganic chemists to make catalysts, okay, that's going to absorb the light and reduce water to dioxide hydrogen. We're going to need membranes, okay, that's material science, to separate dioxin in the fuel, or they'll explode. That's not good, okay. Plant does it by charge separation. Okay, we're going to need mechanical engineers to build robust systems. We're going to need system design teams to put the whole thing together. And then at the end of the day, we're going to need fundamental structure analysis, i.e. hardcore physical chemistry and theoretical analysis to understand what these catalysts do, particularly if they discover them by screening. Okay? And so that's an example of the new world, where if you want to solve that problem, Nate's going to have to assemble this team. And so it's possible that this could be our Sputnik moment. That is, the U.S. government is going to make a big bet on, I think this, on innovation in our universities, led by our Steve True. And I think that chemists, I don't mean to be too parochial talking about Caltech, but Nate Lewis, Harry Gray, Dan Nocera at MIT, there's some really terrific people out there. Harry would remind you, by the way, that both Nate and Dan are his students. Okay, so, but in 20 years' time, maybe not 5, estimated gravely, as you know, by Nate as the timeline for catastrophic climate change. Not sure that's true, but anyway, this could be a great time. You know, last week we had the Swift lecture at Caltech. That's one of our big name lectures, generally an inorganic chemist. And Professor David Milstein from the Weizmann Institute came over, and he gave from Israel, and he gave an inspiring lecture, and something I don't think about a lot because I'm sort of a bioorganic chemist: green catalysis. You know, and so I went to the lecture. It was a name lecture. One should go. And it was fabulous. And so he was describing some catalysts, and he pointed out in his introduction, you know, in green catalytic reactions, they want to split water, convert CO2 to something useful, you know, and take inert molecules like hydrogen, dinitrogen, CO2, and use them in synthesis. So it's a grand scheme. But the idea would be that you'd run reactions at room temperature, no solvent, and no waste. Now think of organic chemistry when we were all in school. So imagine putting in an alcohol and an amine. There'll be a quiz at the end of this, okay? A catalyst, no solvent, and out comes stoichiometrically a new liquid, which is an amide. An alcohol, an amine, a catalyst, and they get out an amide. Really, wow. And of course, they're now moving from ruthenium catalyst to iron catalyst, so the whole name of the game will be not only no solvents, room temperature, stoichiometric, no solvent, but with what they call earth-abundant metals. So we'll move from the clever metals, the ones that people know how to work with, ruthenium, and then see if they can do this with rust, with iron. Stunning. Okay, something I know a little bit about, sort of tangentially over my career, is the biomedical side. And I do see huge and exciting challenges for your generation. It's just going to be exciting. You know, we all look back and admire the discoveries of Big Pharma regarding the war on infectious diseases, particular bacterial infections, although that war continues. But the one I lived through more recently was viral infections that were problematic, and we witnessed an epidemic of HIV infections in the 1980s, which led to a death sentence of a full-blown AIDS patient within 10 years. So in 1980, if you got HIV infection, you were dead in 10 years. That was simply an experimental fact. And it was an epidemic. We had no cure. It's a virus. Okay, and we were all scared in America, Europe, and Africa, and everywhere else. But you don't read about it in the papers anymore, do you? You don't think about it. You don't talk about it at lunch. Why isn't it on the top of the fold in the New York Times? And that's because chemistry came to the rescue with retroviral medicines. And I personally watched this story unfold. I was a scientific founder of Gilead Sciences up in the Bay Area. And so today a patient takes one pill a day instead of 30 in the retro days. It's called a triplet. And now HIV infection is a chronic disease. And to drive this home on a personal note, at least for my generation, we as sports fans, we all remember in L.A. when we read the inspiring story of Magic Johnson, who announced in 1991 that he was leaving basketball, that he fooled around and got an HIV infection, and we knew he would be dead in 1991 in 10 years. That was just going to be an experimental fact, just going to happen. And a triplet didn't exist then. Those compounds didn't become available really till late 90s. And, of course, he's a very prominent, successful, happy businessman in the LA area. And so that's a sort of a story of somebody we know in the LA basin. And I'll make a prediction. I think hepatitis C, which destroys people's liver, it's just a terrible disease. I think I'll make a prediction. Big pharma, big competition going on. Same strategy, 3 pills, 3 compounds in 1 pill, 3 different mechanisms of action. They're going to take out hepatitis C. It's going to be grand. And it'll be chemistry. I shouldn't say this, but you know what happens on the front of the New York Times? They're going to put an MD and say, no, I'm serious. The chemists make the medicines, but they'll have some doctor up there as the spokesperson that did this. I shouldn't say that. That's tacky. Okay, tacky. Oof. Okay. So, all right. So, going forward, though, so I'm making a prediction on hepatitis C, but the world desperately needs influenza's killing people. Cancer is your cell. That's different than a bug or a virus. So cancer's a toughie. Could we make, I don't think we'll cure cancer, but could we make cancer a chronic disease? We just live with it and die at an old age, just living with the cancer and managing it. And then importantly, Alzheimer's disease. And there's spectacular work going out there, not just with pills, but with vaccines. Could we manage diseases, neurological decline associated with aging? Okay, now, so it does turn out, though, that this, again, clouds on the horizon. I'm sorry for this tough love, but I think that for all of you that diligently read CNE News, just about every 3 months there'll be an article on how Big Pharma's fully integrated business model is being questioned, right? And what does that mean? That's a mouthful. Companies own all the drug development functions from basic research all the way to development through humans and then marketing. And the data is that there's a predicament of soaring R&D expenditures. It's costing billions of dollars. That slope is going up and plummeting productivity in research. And so when you go to the February 21st, 2011 CNE News article, they say that in the past 10 years, R&D spending is rising threefold. So here's some numbers. While new molecular entities approved by the FDA are declining by half. So expenditures going up by 3, success going down by a factor of 2. That's not a good business model, Jerry. And so what's happening then is that companies are starting to outsource along the pipeline parts of their programs. It's sort of a dismantling from research, from discovery phase to commercial launch and manufacturing. And we've got a paradox here. I don't understand this. Because the paradox is this decline in big pharma, of which we are premier world-class, along with some of our fellow companies in Europe, like Novartis and Japan. The paradox is this is happening in the greatest revolution in technology and life sciences, right? And so I don't understand this. And so I'm going to make a prediction, because it's all about tox, right? I mean, the whole Merck-Vioxx thing. We don't understand toxicity. And so I think that we're going to have to roll up our sleeves, and your generation is going to have to they're going to have to go back to basics and get a deeper understanding of the biology of these targets. And so I have a general feeling that there'll be increased industry academic alliances going forward. And that'll be good for both the Harvey Mudds and the Caltechs of the world. Okay, so we know that science and technology are forces that can create economic growth. But who pays for this? It's really the government, because research is very, very expensive. It costs $1 million a year just to run a small research group of mine at Caltech, 15 people, if I include the overhead. And so if there's a sense that with our huge national debt that we've taken on, there'll be a decline in government funding just in terms of what's available, then we're going to have to, and this is your problem, there's going to have to be another business model to rebalance the research portfolio. Bob, it's going to be maybe not your problem. Well, no, because this is an undergraduate institution mostly, so you'll be protected. And so it may turn out that we'll have to go back to the way it was in the 40s, where private philanthropy, billionaires, multi-billionaires, step to the plate and endow graduate programs, and we are less dependent on the federal government. Or that corporate America, now I'm really daydreaming, would say that this is integral to the success of their operations and get more involved in corporate philanthropy. So that's where's the development people out there? That's a show of hands. That's a challenge for development, for advancement. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a time out. I'm going to get on my soapbox. I think that I'm worried. So this is a soapbox moment. You can tune out. I believe that there's been a decline in ethics in the scientific establishment. And that's not from reading the New York Journal, the New York Times. That's from the Wall Street Journal. Okay, balanced. And where they documented it, data, across all fields, not just chemistry and chemical engineering, that there's increased conflicts of interest, bias in research, fraud due to pressure to publish. And so I got to tell you, we're going to take this seriously, we the leaders in universities, and we must reinvigorate all efforts on all sides, efforts at integrity at the highest level. I'm going to come back to this at the end. How am I doing on time? Okay? Okay, I'll try not to go too long. Now I have two debates here I just want to give you a head up on, and then talk about global perspective, and then I'll give you my bullets. So let me try to do this quickly so we can have some fun in question and answer. I think there's a couple of debates going on. I think there's something less relevant here to Harvey Mudd, but going to be important to the 50% of you that go on to PhDs. There's a PhD training debate, okay? And that is our traditional model of producing PhDs, me included, is that we, enter a research university and we compete for federal grants, individual R01s, right? But there's only so many R01s out there. And so Ralph Cicerone, he came to an academy meeting at Irvine, and he pointed out they were looking at the quality of life of postdocs. So there's this limbo that people live in, post-PhD, but don't yet have a permanent job. And they found out that particularly in the biological sciences, that postdocs are not spending 4 years anymore, or 6. Some of them are spending 8 years in postdoctoral positions. I think this is a big red flag. We've got these people bottled up in a pipeline with no future, poor salaries, and yet they don't have a permanent position they can work for. I think we got some problems. And so what I would just caution all of you out there, that when you're highly trained as a PhD in specialized topics, you're going to need to be flexible regarding career opportunities, and you should be open to looking at non-traditional paths. That utilize your science and engineering background. This is important, so pay attention. But cross into business, law, government, health, environment, energy, and agricultural sectors of our society. Run for Congress. Okay, run for president. And I got to tell you, being on a board at Beckman Coulter, where we interacted at a certain point in our company's time, that we're a regulated industry because we have tests that impact people's health, where the FDA oversees us properly, just like the pharmaceutical industry. When I would talk to independent lawyers who had PhDs, they also had law degrees, on the phone about proper quality controls and processes, these were stunningly brilliant people. And so imagine getting a PhD, but not doing research, getting a law degree, and then going into a part of the sector where you help manage these companies and prevent scandals. It's just so be non-traditional, be flexible. Think about it. Okay. The other debate that's going on, and I'm going to make this one short, and that is this basic versus applied debate. This has been going on since I was a graduate student. You're nodding your head right. Okay. And so there was this very provocative article in Nature, authored by George Whitesides, who's one of our great chemists, by the way, in America, just a fabulous guy at Harvard, and his longtime friend John Deutsch from MIT. And this was in the January 6th issue of Nature, and they had this provocative article titled, "Let's Get Practical." And just to cut to the bottom line, they felt that chemistry is, at the end of a century of expansion, that it's mature and fully embedded in society, da-da-da-da-da-da. And that this subdisciplinary structure of organic chemists and inorganic chemists and physical chemists, this silo, this subdiscipline structure really isn't addressing Nate Lewis's problem of how do you create artificial photosynthesis. That if we get stuck in our silos, they're making the argument that that we're not going to get there to work on complex problems. And because chemistry rests on three unequal legs, I'm quoting from their article now, so these are not my ideas, these are George's. They just point out something that's trivially obvious: industry, academia, and government. And so industry is incremental. They're not going to do innovation. It's too long term. So they want to do incremental to make robust products. Government really just sets policy by their funding decisions. And so the one place in the world where we can have true freedom and flexibility to take science in new directions is going to be the universities. And so it was their call to arms that we should reverse engineer, my term, not theirs, that basically we should start with the practical problem, assemble the teams to solve it, and that in the process of getting to an almost insolvable problem, we'll uncover the fundamental questions that we're missing to get there. Now, notice I didn't take a position on this. I'm just saying it's out there. So I want you to think about that until we get to the question and answer session. Okay, one last thing, and then I'll get to the bullets and I'll quit. Okay, this was a comment by Joe. I was at an ACS meeting on training or something like that. They asked me to give a talk. I don't know why. And this was one of the past presidents of the ACS, Joe Francisco, was there, and he was talking about the importance of having a global perspective. And so I put a bullet in on this because this is hugely important for you kids. Okay, and that is, so let me tell you the no-brainer sentence first and then the recommendation. So addressing global issues such as clean water, we all want clean water, right? Environmental degradation and global climate change, that's going to require, because we're all involved in this on planet Earth, it's going to require skilled scientists working together on an international basis. And so with the globalization of industries, there is a demand for more internationally oriented workforce with an increasing number of jobs linked to international trade. And so educating tomorrow's chemists, this is important for Harvey Mudd, to work in tomorrow's world will require global competence. Okay, so one of my bullets will be a recommendation. Okay, so it's a global workplace, and just as we have students coming from other countries to America, we will go to other countries, to China and to Japan and all over the world to do research there as well, and we'll all be linked by the web. Okay, so my advice to the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors at Harvard Mudd. Drum roll. Okay, now the first one, you've heard it every single graduation speech you've ever been to, but it's true, so let me repeat it. Okay, find your passion in science and engineering. Find your passion in chemistry. Okay, and now I'm at it. You getting excited? Okay, and at the end of this, I'm going to say, and work hard. Now listen to this, work very hard. I'm deadly serious. These are serious times, so not only find your passion, but work hard and very hard. Okay, this I didn't talk about, but it's been important in my life. And this might be the one comment that changes you. Find a mentor. None of us gets where we are going alone. Now, here's the secret sauce. It turns out you don't get to pick your mentor in life. So the old guys will tell you that. So you don't know ahead of time who it's going to be. The mentor picks you. And then after you've been mentored, you figure it out. They wrote letters for you. They got you new labs. They yelled at the chairman, whatever. Whatever part of life it is. Jerry Burson, for me, showed me the joy of research. That was a gift. Jack Roberts looked out for me when I was an assistant professor. Somebody's got to write the letter if you get in the academy, right? Okay. And then Arnold Beckman taught me philanthropy, the joy of giving back. So those were my 3 mentors. I got 3. I don't know what the average number is, but I know who they are. And they picked me. And so the mentor picks you. That's the secret for tonight, but find one. And they'll come at different stages in your life. And then if you know that, you'll then give forward. So I now mentor people, my own students and others. Okay, now I'm circling back, full circle. I'm tying the bow on my lecture. So be aware of the importance of luck, good or bad. It's unpredictable, and be ready to seize it. So you hear books, the right place at the right time. That's another way to say luck. Okay? And so luck is unpredictable. You couldn't have predicted it would happen, and you didn't make it happen. Sputnik, for me, changed America, and I benefited. You got it? Okay. Okay. Make up your own mind about the debate on the basic versus applied research. So even though I could make a strong case, and I'm sure Nate Lewis made an eloquent case for artificial photosynthesis, I would work for him. I would argue that there's an enormous need still for fundamental research. Enormous. And so I personally believe we need both. Like a stock portfolio, we got to do both and not get religion and just swing the pendulum to the other side. I hope that's okay, Bob. Okay? Be flexible in your research career or your career path. Be a survivor. If we're in hard times, be a survivor. And so for chemists here, and taking all these marvelous chemistry courses, and I just really love spending the time with the professors, okay, you should also take the time, if you want, to take a business course or an engineering course before you leave Harvey Mudd. Because in the future you'll be working on teams, and I think you'll need to grow with these teams and be able to talk to different people. And I had so much fun the other day. I came over to the Keck Graduate Institute of Applied Life Science, your neighbor, not too far away, and have a coffee with Dr. Jim Osborne. Jim ran basically central research at Beckman Coulter, and now he's a professor over here. So go over and chat him up if you want some advice on this. Okay? Pay attention, I've said this, pay attention to the importance of ethics in science. Wherever you are the rest of your life, don't overstate your data. Because here's the bottom line. If we lose the trust of the non-science community, we are doomed. So we got to take it up another notch. And then again, at the risk of repetition, my generation was a mile deep in one subject. With the internet, you guys are a mile deep in several areas, so be creative and learn how to make the connections in order to innovate. The way in which chemistry is done will increasingly be characterized by telecommunicated scientific networks in the global marketplace. And so when I was a kid, taking foreign languages, German, French, whatever, it was a pain in the neck. Now I would say embrace it. Learn a language. Learn 2 languages. We're in a global marketplace, a global world. And travel abroad if you have the chance. If your mom and dad travel to China, go with them, or to Japan or whatever, do it. And for some of you after your PhD, go do a postdoc in Tokyo or Shanghai or whatever, or Abu Dhabi. Get out there because the world is global. Now this is a biggie. This is a real biggie. It's very Caltech-y, but it's a biggie. And that is, we got a lot of people in this room, maybe 200. And here's what's astonishing. It won't be the average of all of you. It will be a few individuals. There may be one person in this room that will change the world in the next 20 years. It won't be the average effort of all of you. Certainly my effort is insignificant, even though I've had lots of 50 students are now professors. But a few individuals and a few institutions, perhaps, can make a big difference. So examine the history of Caltech, but I think you could do this at Harvard or Stanford, or and someday I think this institution, Harvey Mudd, as you grow longer in years. So Arnold Beckman, he invented the diagnostic industry, all those instruments that allowed biochemistry to flourish. Pauling, the chemical bond. Von Karman, he invented rocketry, jets. One guy. Feynman, Lewis, genes, Lee Hood. Let's sequence the human genome. And so one person having a vision can change the world. So don't ever forget that you could be that person. And I believe maybe statistically there'll be that person tonight in the room. I hope I've helped. And that chemistry, no question, I love the video. Chemistry has become important at the interface with other disciplines. I'm reaffirming biology, physics, materials, and engineering. So what's energy? Well, energy is chemistry and engineering. New medicines, chemistry and human biology. Devices, your iPhone, that's chemistry and materials. Crop protection, chemistry and agriculture. Global climate change, chemistry and environmental science. Okay. Are we alone? Chemistry and astrobiology. Yeah. Now that's an interesting question, right? So we are going to ask the question, if there's water on Mars, and there is, and if there's water on Europa, and there is, that's a very special solvent. I don't think there'll be little green people, but will there be other life under pretty severe conditions? And then, now hang on to your hat, will it be DNA? Okay, so not only is there other life, but will it be DNA-based? Maybe our world came from there. I don't know. So that's a profound philosophical question, and I'll probably die before I'll get to see that answer, but the younger people might actually see that answer, and so you should be fired up about that. Okay, my last provocative bullet, and then I'll stop. Because it is central, and I've just made the point that chemistry is at the interface of all these other disciplines, will chemistry be merged into other fields? Will it disappear? It's an existential question. That is, it's so central that it'll be in medical schools and engineering departments. I know at Caltech, we're teaching more organic chemistry than we ever did before. Why? Because we created a biomedical option, a biomedical engineering option, and they all got to take organic chemistry, right? So the class has gone from 40 to 70. And so they call it something else, biomedical engineering, but we're teaching chemistry like gangbusters. So for the professors, there's actually, I'm going to make a prediction, there's actually going to be a greater increased need of teachers teaching the subject of chemistry. You'll always have a job, the Full Employment Act. But there is a risk, and we're going to have to deal with it, get over it. That is that, chemistry departments may be embedded in other disciplines, and we're just going to have to deal with that and not feel too possessive. That hurts me, but I think that may be the reality. And so, again, I want to thank you for the invitation to give this lecture. It would have been much easier to bring my PowerPoint and show you slides of gels, but I'd be pleased to take any questions. Thank you again.